Hey, what's going on, guys? Steven here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be checking out a 2024 film. I figure it's time for me to start pumping out some reviews for newer movies because I need to catch on them for a potential ranking at the end of the year. And I'd rather review them on this channel than to just talk about them at the end of the year without any prior videos from earlier in the year. So today we're going to be checking out the POV slasher In a Violent Nature, released in 2024 and directed by Chris Nash. So if you haven't heard of In a Violent Nature yet, this is basically a slasher film filmed from the killer's perspective. So you're pretty much following the killer the entire time. It's almost like following Jason the entire time in a Friday the 13th movie or something like that. It has that feel to it. It's based in the woods, like a camp slasher. Except you're not following the typical teenagers camping or camp counselors or something like that. You're following the killer almost the entire time, and you get to see kind of the killer's setups and traps and his way of how to get to places when he needs to be and how to get there fast. And it's an interesting perspective. If you've watched tons and tons and tons of slashers like I have, and most horror fans have, you finally get to see kind of what the killer does throughout the movie, which somewhat pays off and somewhat doesn't pay off for me. So starting off, you have these teenagers walking through the woods and they find this little necklace hanging on a pipe, and they take it, they steal it, which ends up being the killer's mom's necklace, which is like the only thing that keeps him buried in the ground. So it has a pretty basic story setup, which I liked. I like basic story setups when it comes to slashers. I think it works a lot better than a really confusing and intricate storyline like most of the popular slasher films get into later in their series. But if you just look at the original story and the original movie of most of those, it has a basic setup on pretty much every slasher that we know and love today. So it does have that basic setup to it, which really worked for me. Basically, they steal this necklace and the killer comes out of the ground, which we know him as Jonathan, very basic name. You don't really figure that out till near the end-ish, but the killer is pretty much resurrected once they steal that necklace, and he goes on a killing spree. And pretty much from that moment, from when he raises from the ground, you are following him, and you see what the killer does when he finds his mask, his weapons, each victim that he goes after. You watch him stalk them, hunt them, and then eventually kill them in a very violent way. This movie has some violent kills. I mean, it lives up to the name. Great special effects, great practical effects from what I think is practical effects. It looks like practical effects, and it looks amazing. For those of you that are gore hounds, this movie will definitely get a couple points for you on that factor. I wouldn't consider myself a gore hound. I can respect the practical effects, and I think they look awesome, but at the end of the day, a basic slasher kill is enough for me. I was never bored by just classic slasher kills. I don't need a ton of blood and disgusting visuals of bones breaking and stuff like that, but it's cool every once in a while, and it's cool to see how far practical effects have come. And really, I mean, it's cool to see practical effects used in a way that it really used to be used back in the 80s and 70s. So it's not really as much as they've advanced, it's just cool to see them used in a more classic way, and instead of just seeing a bunch of CGI in most horror movies that we see today. And of course, I'm mostly referring to the yoga kill. If you've seen this movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen this movie, watch it and you will know immediately what I'm talking about. That kill is just absolutely brutal. One of the most violent kills I've seen since Terrifier 2, and I'm not joking about that. It lives up to Terrifier 2, right on par with that. And I think overall it does have a smooth story. You get somewhat of a storyline with the teenagers. Although most of the story is following the killer, there is like a 5 to 10 minute scene of the teenagers at a campfire, and they're kind of discussing the lore of where they're staying and the story of Jonathan. And I think that really gave it a Friday the 13th feel that I really liked. It was basically just one camera shot rotating around the campfire for the entire dialogue. And I thought that was really cool. It put off a simple vibe that matched the movie's pace, and I really liked the dialogue of the teenagers. So with the minimal dialogue we get from the teenagers, I thought that campfire scene really helped out a lot, and it put a little bit of story behind this killer and the whole lore around the killer. And I do like the look of the killer, the look of Jonathan. He kind of breaks into this building and steals a really, really old, what seems to be like a fire suit, like an old fire suit. Has almost like a bug-eye mask, and he has like a chain with a hook as a weapon, which I thought was really unique and cool. The mask is okay for me. It does have a unique look to it, and it is kind of scary, but for what it's worth, I think it's unique and it's pretty cool. It's not my favorite mask in the slasher genre, but by any means, but it's definitely pretty cool and very unique. So the killer has a pretty cool look to it. I think he was actually scarier before he found the mask. His natural face look was much scarier, I think. But on the other side of this movie, on the mixed to bad side, this movie is a slow burn somewhat. It does feel almost like a quick movie, but at the same time it feels like a slow burn, because I'd say at least 80 to 70% of this movie, you are literally just watching this killer walk through the woods with nothing happening. I mean, he finds the victims eventually, but a good amount of the movie is him just walking through the woods, and you get a POV back shot of him walking, and it's just thump, 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 and nature sounds and different shots of the nature, which I thought was done really well, and I like the sounds of the movie, but it does get tiring. I mean, if you are tired at all, if you watch this late at night, you're almost guaranteed to fall asleep. Not because I would say it's a boring movie, but it's just that feel of the movie is slow and quiet, and it's almost like something you would put on to fall asleep to. Like some people put on rain noises to fall asleep. Like I could see somebody putting this movie on to fall asleep to, just because of the nature sounds and just the sounds of the killer walking through the forest. It's almost soothing. You could say that probably. It's just a very calm horror movie. It's like the calmest, most violent slasher movie you'll ever see. That's probably the most accurately describing I could do for this movie. It's the most soothing, violent slasher movie you'll ever see. But it does get a little bit taxing after a while, just watching this killer walk through the woods so much. But the kills do pay off in the end, and it didn't bother me that much. I was still intrigued in the movie, and as a huge Friday the 13th fan, I found it pretty cool to just watch him walk through the woods. So it wasn't as bad for me, but I could definitely see how that would be a huge negative for some people who aren't gigantic Friday the 13th fans, because I would relate this killer to Jason more than any other slasher villain. So I found it kind of cool to watch him walk through the woods, but I can definitely understand how it gets a lot more taxing than it did on me for other people. And the main thing about this movie that I really didn't like was the ending. It had a very, very slow ending, and I did watch this movie late at night, so I was already pretty tired, and this ending dang near put me to sleep. You basically have the final girl, which we don't really know. We don't really care about her that much. I mean, we see her watch her boyfriend get killed, and that's pretty much the only story depth we get with her. So you somewhat feel bad for her, but it's kind of not, because you don't even really know her. And you basically have her getting picked up by a girl in a truck, a woman in a truck, and they have this super long dialogue, which I couldn't even tell you what it's about because it's pretty much irrelevant. I think she was talking about the lore of the killer and how she sees people come out of these woods much worse off than she is, and stuff like that. And it's just really, really boring. And the end of the movie is kind of her just looking out into the woods and nothing happens, and you're just waiting for something to happen. On the bright side of that, you do get a little bit of dread with her driving away and then looking out into the woods. You think something's going to happen, but it doesn't. And I just really didn't. I thought it was a dull ending to an interesting slasher movie that I was enjoying the pretty much entire way. It had a pretty dull ending for me, but that's pretty much the only real negative I have for this movie. So overall, I did enjoy this movie. I thought it had that classic feel, that classic slasher feel that I love and adore, and always gains lots of points for me. I'm going to give In a Violent Nature a 4 stars. I think The gore and practical effects of this movie gave it those stars, and the classic feel and the unique look to the slasher villain, and the overall uniqueness of the movie where we get this killer POV. I don't think this could be done really again. Maybe a sequel to this movie would work, but as far as other directors and other movie makers grabbing this idea and doing it, I think it would die very fast, and I think that it would get boring very fast. But for this standalone movie, I enjoyed it. I think it's a 4-star movie. And so far, it's probably my favorite 2024 horror movie that I've seen yet. There's one other one that I'm going to review as well that is really close. I'll save that. But overall, I enjoyed In a Violent Nature. I think you guys should check it out. It is on Shudder. So definitely go check that out and comment on the video. Let me know what you guys think about it. We can have a conversation. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you guys for checking me out, and I will see you in the next one.